The underpinning to every successful individual is their education. The quality of that education relies on both educators and their facilities. The topical question with parents nowadays is whether to send their children to a public or private school. Today, I propose that public school education holds an edge over private school education holds an edge over private school education. I will champion this proposition with 3 claims. 1, public schools offer a more varied and regulated education. 2, public schools cater towards a more diverse demographic in comparison to private schools. And 3, public schools perform just as good or even better than private schools. To begin, public schools offer a more varied and regulated education. According to GradeSchools.org, a website dedicated to informing and giving parenting tips to parents, all teachers in public school are usually state certified or at minimum working towards certification. Certification ensures that a teacher has gone through the training required by the state, which includes student teaching and coursework. Teachers in the private schools, however, may not be required to have a certification. In addition to this, according to the National Center of Education Statistics, 56% of public school teachers had a master's degree or higher degree. Compare this with private school teachers, with only 43% having a master's or higher degree. To move on, Christopher Lubinsky and Sarah Thule Lubinsky, professors of College of Education at the University of Illinois, also declare autonomy as detrimental to private schools. Autonomy in this context means they're working outside of government control. Autonomy is being used to hold on to outdated instructional practices and to hire and certified teachers. Public schools, on the other hand, are moving beyond traditional exercises and are applying more complex real-world problems in the classroom. A lot of people argue that private schools offer more specialized education, but as a rebuttal, charter and magnet schools are offered by states, which likewise offer specialized education. Moving on to my second claim, public schools cater towards a more diverse demographic in comparison to private schools. Public schools are operating under federal government, therefore they're receiving tax dollars, which means they're obligated to accept as many students as possible. This accept-all admission allows for a racially diverse campus. According to the National Center of Education Statistics, about half the population enrolled in public schools are of white ethnicity, while 25% are Hispanic, 16% are African American, and about 45% are Asian/Pacific Islanders. To contrast this, private schools only have about 72% population white ethnicity, only about 9% African American, and 10% Hispanics. This big diversion of numbers really outlines the lack of diversity which is needed to both teach social tolerance and cultural respect. Public schools also accommodate significantly more for special needs students. According to grade schools, due to special education laws, public schools must educate all children and provide the necessary programs to meet their special needs. This means that all school districts have a special education program and teachers who are trained to work with special needs. Again, this is contrasted greatly by private schools, which only have 64% of private schools have at least one student with a formally identified disability, compared to 98% of public schools having this program. Moving on, my third point, public schools perform just as good or even better than private schools. According to the aforementioned professors Christopher Lubinsky and Sarah Thule Lubinsky of the University of Illinois, After you account for the socioeconomic factors that benefit private schools, such as higher tax rates, which improve quality of education, and also more accessibility to tutors, public schools elementaries still, on average, are more effective at teaching mathematics. Furthermore, accounting for school size, location, and teaching staff, public schools' National Assessment of Educational Progress, a nationwide test that's used to gauge the educational standards of the United States, their scores were on par with the private sector. Henry Brule, to further solidify my claim, private school graduates enjoyed no more job satisfaction than public school graduates. Harry, in a research paper by Harold Winglinski of the George Washington University, the outcome for his study proved that there was no difference between comprehensive public schools and other types of schools when it came to the attendance of job satisfaction. So to conclude, public school education holds an edge over private school education because one, public schools offer a more varied and regulated education. Public schools cater towards a more diverse demographic in comparison to private schools. And finally, public schools perform just as good or even better than private schools. Thank you. You need this copyright, but I'd like the staple fill out.
That's okay. I'm not worried about that. All right, the structural stuff is good at the beginning, so you're fine there. I think you need to explain a little bit more about why we're listening to this argument so we have a context for this. The notion that there's an edge, it's got to be something that's a little bit more quantifiable. Some of the things that you cite seem like they are, well, there might be a statistical difference, but the results is what you want to compare. And the closest you get to results is the math test that you have toward the end, and the job satisfaction standard. Everything else is just kind of, intangible when it comes to measuring something, and I think that's a little bit of an issue. There's an assumption, for instance, on the second point, that you have to have a diversity of population in order to teach intercultural tolerance, but there is diversity of population. It's just not as substantial as it might be in the public schools. And so the question is, how significant is that difference and how much does it undermine the ability to accomplish that goal? And there's not really any explanation about why that, just because they have a smaller number, you're saying they can't do it. And I think that that's an inferential leap that needs a lot more information on it. You cited your sources for the most part, so I thought that was pretty good. Some of the information is a little abstract, but I think it's, like I said, I think it's usually presented clearly, and your presentation, you're a little hesitant while you're reading sometimes, and I'm not an English teacher, so I got to be careful about this. And I did go to a private university, so I got to be careful about this because I'm not sure which one of us is going to end up with an egg on their face. But when you had the one claim, said they do just as good, I'm going, I don't think that's the way you would phrase that. I think that's the wrong grammatical form. They would do as well. All right. That, what do I know? That sounds picayune, doesn't it? All right, sorry.